So Jesus is arrested. They start to question him, and he just stays silent. This is like his platform to start preaching the truth to everybody, and he just stays silent. Such an interesting thing. Hey friends, welcome to Bibletime. Craig here. Hoodie kind of morning. We're going to jump right in today to Matthew chapter 26, starting in verse 57. We're right in the midst of Jesus just got arrested, and he was betrayed by a kiss, which, if you missed that, we talked about that yesterday, and so check that video out. But it's a very weird and interesting thought that Judas would betray him by kissing him, of all things. Instead of just pointing at him, instead of saying, that's the guy, he kissed him. Anyway, so this is what happens next. We're going to just jump right in. If you have a Bible, open it to Matthew 26 and grab a pen if you can. If not, you'll see it on the screen and you'll hear it. But let's jump in and see what the Word of God says today. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest. So what we're going to see is this bouncing back and forth between all these leaders, some Jewish, some Roman, and it's kind of confusing, like, all who he's going to and what their roles are. But there's, of course, a lot of Jewish leaders, but the high priest is the highest in charge and authority. And so he goes to him first because supposedly this is a Jewish crime that he's committing. And so, obviously the Jews, the Israelites, have a law from God. But at this particular moment in history, the Roman Empire is ruling over them, just like most of, Europe and the Middle East and all that. And so, this moment in history, Jesus and his people are sort of under two laws, and the question of, well, which law is taking precedence. And so, anyway, it's just a really unique thing that he's arrested for Jewish wrong, supposedly, blasphemy, and yet he was crucified by Roman authority. But he didn't break any Roman laws. And so, anyway, we'll get to all that. All right, so he's taken first to the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. I never noticed that before. He sat with the guards to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At least two came forward and said, "This man said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." So this is, I know we talked about this a couple of videos ago. This is like, basically he talked about the temple being destroyed in two places. In 2 times he did talk about this. And one time he was talking about the physical temple, and it was indeed destroyed, and of course that happened later, and so prophecy is proven, after the fact most of the time. And then the other time he was talking about his own body and being resurrected in 3 days, or rebuilt. And so that's, they're referring to something that actually happened, but they're using it against him in a false way. And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus remained silent. This is so interesting to me, that all throughout this trial, these proceedings of him going to this person or that person with Pilate, we'll see it as we keep reading, but over and over and over again, Jesus remains silent. And it's like even in Isaiah, it talks about, he spoke not a word, and he went like a sheep to the shearer. And it's just such interesting contrast to me that the one that has all of the ability in the universe, he could have called, like he said, legions of angels. He could literally destroy these people with a word of his mouth. He could do anything he wanted, and yet he stayed silent. He didn't even call out their hypocrisy, their sin, their, you're claiming to be righteous, but you're looking for false evidence against me, which is totally, against God's law. He just stayed silent. And I mean, I guess my assumption is that it's because he knew what he needed to do and he wasn't trying to talk his way out of it. But it just makes me always consider how often in my life am I always trying to make a defense for something. And so this year, for example, 2020, Bible time is one of the projects that I've committed to for this year. But internal work, my 2 words that I felt like I got from the Lord, and I'm not typically a word guy from the Lord, but this year I definitely felt like I got the words unoffendable and undefending, and that the Lord wanted me to focus on just being unoffendable this year. And I can be really defensive and always want to say something if somebody brings a criticism or critique, and I first response, yeah but, and man, it's really, really hard for me to stay silent or to just listen and receive criticism or whatever. And of course there's a time and a place for explaining and even defending. There is a place for defending, but I don't want that to be my first response anytime something is said that I don't like. I want to be able to listen to something and receive it for what it is, and not immediately defend myself. And so I guess just to say, Jesus' silence for me is such an encouragement, because it's there is a part of our life where we don't have, there's a part of trust in trusting God to be our defense, trusting God to fight for our reputation, trusting God to, whatever it might be. And so, that's just me. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Super interesting to me, because this is the reason that Jesus came. We saw in Matthew 16 that Jesus was asking about his identity. They finally Peter recognizes who you are. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus, for the first time ever, calls a human being blessed. He says, you are blessed, Simon, son of Jonah, and on this rock, this declaration of who I am, I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. This is the whole thing that Jesus came to do, is to show the world that he is the Messiah. Sorry, this is so bothering me. I'm OCD like that. Anyway, he came to, say, I am the Messiah. I'm the sent one from God. I'm the Son of God here to redeem the world. And they're literally asking, and he says, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. And so, this is what he came for. They ask him, but they weren't really interested in the answer. Or I guess they already knew that if he tried to say yes to the answer, that was going to be their evidence that he's blaspheming. There was no openness to the idea that he was. And so the question was posed simply as a form of trapping him for an accusation that they wanted to put against him. How do we know this? Because then the high priest tore his robes, which is a sign of, right there, which is a sign of, this is absolutely completely wrong. He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? So here it is. The declaration that he is the Christ, sent by God, is, in the high priest's opinion, blasphemy. Which, on the other hand, is reasonable. If a person is lying, if the person is not actually the Messiah, this would be blasphemy. The things that Jesus said, it's why we believe about him what we do. He claimed not only to be a human messianic military leader, he claimed to be God. He said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He said, before Abraham was, I am. A reference to God's name in Exodus 3, where Moses says, who should I say sent me? And he says, I am. It's so many things that Jesus said that if he was lying, the honest truth is, in many ways, these guys are justifiable in their anger and their accusation of blasphemy against God Most High. And so it's, I guess, easy for us, and myself included, to just be like, the scribes, the Pharisees, the chief priests, they're so evil. They didn't, and they were evil because they were looking for false witness. But I think in some ways it was kind of doing what they should be doing. The problem is that they didn't look at the evidence objectively and really open their heart to whether or not Jesus was who he said he was. So I guess I just think about all that because it's pretty obvious to me that Jesus shows up and he is who he is. Of course, there was a few things that he said, kind of in secret with his guys, but most of who he was, the miracles, the healings, the teaching, the preaching, this was all out in the open for everybody to hear. What he did, who he hung out with, it was all available for everybody to hear. And I find it so interesting that of all the people that engaged with Jesus or heard him or came across his path, there's so many people that came across his path, and the responses to him are so vastly different. Like, one person might come to Jesus and think, oh my gosh, you are the Christ. One person might come and say, Son of David, I need you to heal me. Other people might experience the same Jesus and think you're a blasphemer and you're evil. Other people said you're filled with a demon. Like, it's crazy the different responses that people give to the same person. And so to me, it just speaks to this human ability to encounter Jesus and have such different responses. It's this idea that, just because something is the way that it is doesn't mean that everybody's going to respond to it the same way. Like, you might look at a political issue, and you look at the political issue and you're like, this is obvious. Like, there's no gray in this issue. It is X and not Y, period. And yet somebody might be on the other side of the issue and look at it and say, no, it's exactly the opposite of that. It's Y and not X, and there's no gray about it. Like, how are you not seeing this? And humans do this on all kinds of things. And so this is what they were doing. Like, he was the same person to everybody, but these guys, because of maybe their positions, maybe what was ingrained in them, maybe jealousy, whatever it was, they couldn't truly receive Jesus for who he was. They couldn't wrap their mind around it, or they were unwilling. All to say, so how's that apply to us? I think primarily what we need to do is not form Jesus in our image, not say, well, who do I want you to be? Who do I need you to be? But to read the scripture and see who he is, who he was, who he is, what he said, what he believes, what he wants to do, what he wants for us, and to receive what he has for us the way that he puts it, not us trying to form him in our image. And my thoughts. You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment? They answered, he deserves death. Then they spit in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you? How much time we got? Why don't we call it a day for today? We'll pick up in verse 69 tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's enough here to not just breeze over. Like, I genuinely think that there's something to us taking a moment to consider this. Like, if we come to Jesus with a question, have we already determined in our heart what we want the answer to be? And maybe the question is like, hey, can I have this job? Or is this person right for me to marry? Or, hey God, is it a sin for me to, like, are you okay with me doing whatever? And if the answer that comes from him is different than we've already predetermined that we want, are we okay with that? Or are we then gonna just be mad and accuse and, in a sense, kill his voice in our life because it doesn't match up with what we already wanted? Jesus didn't match up with what they expected, what they wanted, and so they killed him for it. Are we willing to accept whatever God has for us, even if it is in contrast to what we desire? That's the primary thought that I have. And then again, this idea of Jesus staying silent, which I think we're going to see a couple more times. So anyway, that's what we got today. Thanks for joining me. Couple verses here in Bible time, and I'll plan on seeing you again tomorrow. God bless.